The wind moved like a restless spirit across the wide Montana plains, bending the tall grass into silver waves under the dying light. Caleb Rowan stood at the edge of his porch, one rough hand gripping the wooden post, and watched the sky bleed into shades of crimson and violet. The ranch stretched around him, lonely, stubborn, endless. The house creaked behind him, as if it too felt the weight of silence. He had not spoken to another soul in 3 days. The cattle were fed, the fences were mended, the horses were brushed and settled. Yet when night came, it pressed against him like a living thing. The memory of laughter, his mother's, his younger brother's, still clung to the corners of the house. But they had been gone for years, taken by fever in one bitter winter that had left Caleb with nothing but debt and land too wide for one man. He had not meant to send for a bride. It had been the suggestion of Mrs. Hargrove from town. "You need a woman's touch," she had said firmly, sliding the mail-order catalogue across the counter of her store. "You need someone to warm that cold house of yours." He had laughed then, embarrassed, but the nights had grown longer since that day, and loneliness had a way of wearing a man down, grain by grain. So he had written a letter, a simple one, honest. He did not promise riches, he did not promise fine dresses or grand adventures, only shelter, respect, a steady life. He had not expected anyone to answer. The sound of wagon wheels broke through the hush of evening. Caleb stiffened. A small hired carriage rolled down the dirt path, its lantern swinging faintly. His heart pounded against his ribs. He stepped off the porch slowly, boots crunching on gravel. The carriage stopped. The driver climbed down first, muttering something about storms coming in from the north. Then he turned and helped a woman descend. Caleb forgot how to breathe. She was smaller than he had imagined, wrapped in a simple blue traveling cloak, dust clinging to the hem. A single leather case rested beside her feet. Strands of dark chestnut hair had slipped loose from her bonnet, catching the wind like fragile ribbons. Her eyes lifted. They were not timid. They were not foolish. They were steady, though tired. "Mr. Rowan?" she asked, her voice soft but clear. "Yes." His throat felt dry as sand. "You must be Miss Eleanor Whitmore." She nodded. "I am." There was a silence then, thick and uncertain. The driver cleared his throat. "Storm's brewing fast. I won't be staying long." Caleb stepped forward. "Of course." He reached for Eleanor's case, careful not to brush her fingers, though he felt the warmth of her nearness all the same. "You'd better come inside." The first drop of rain struck the dust between them. By the time they reached the porch, the sky had opened. Thunder rolled low and deep, like a warning. Inside, the house felt smaller with her presence. Caleb lit an extra lamp, the golden glow pushing shadows into corners. Eleanor removed her bonnet carefully and placed it on the table. Her hair tumbled down in a dark wave that framed a face both delicate and determined. "It's larger than I imagined," she said quietly, glancing around at the plain wooden walls and sturdy furniture. Caleb shifted awkwardly. "It's not much." "It's solid," she corrected gently. That surprised him. Most would have noticed what it lacked. She noticed what it was. He cleared his throat. "You must be tired. It's a long journey from Boston." "Yes," she admitted. "Longer than I expected." He hesitated. "There's stew on the stove. I made it this afternoon. It's simple. I would be grateful." They sat across from one another at the narrow table. The storm raged outside, wind clawing at the windows. Caleb became painfully aware of every small movement she made, the way she folded her hands before eating, the quiet grace with which she lifted the spoon. "Why did you come?" The question slipped out before he could stop it. Her eyes met his. "Because I had nowhere else to go." The words were not dramatic. They were not self-pitying. They were simple truth. He waited. "My father passed last spring," she continued. "His debts were greater than we knew. The house was sold. I worked as a seamstress, but—" She paused, searching for strength rather than sympathy. A woman alone in the city has few protections. Caleb felt something tighten in his chest. "You could have chosen a wealthier rancher," he said quietly. She gave the faintest hint of a smile. "Your letter was honest. That matters more than wealth." The lamp flickered. Outside, lightning split the sky. Inside, something shifted. After supper, he showed her the spare room. It had once belonged to his mother. The quilt was faded but clean. The small window faced east toward sunrise. "I can sleep in the barn loft if you prefer," he offered stiffly. Her brows lifted slightly. "It is your home, Mr. Rowan." "Caleb," he corrected softly. She hesitated. "Then you must call me Eleanor." The sound of her name on his tongue felt unfamiliar, important. "Eleanor," he said. A warmth moved between them, subtle, fragile. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For shelter." The words echoed in his mind long after he retreated to his own room. He lay awake listening to the storm, but the loneliness that usually crept across his chest felt different, less sharp, as though the house itself had inhaled. In the early hours of dawn, the storm passed. Caleb rose before the sun, as always, but when he stepped into the kitchen, he stopped short. Eleanor stood by the stove, sleeves rolled to her elbows, hair loosely braided over one shoulder. The scent of fresh bread filled the air. "You needn't have done that," he said. She turned, startled, then smiled shyly. "I wake early." It seemed wrong not to help. The morning light touched her face gently. "You're not here to earn your keep," he said. "I would like to," she replied simply. He studied her. There was no fear in her posture now, no regret, just quiet resolve. He stepped closer, careful not to crowd her. "Life here is not easy." "I did not come for easy." The honesty in her voice struck him deeper than any confession. Outside, the land stretched wide and uncertain. Inside, two strangers stood in a kitchen warmed by bread and new beginnings. Caleb realized then that shelter was not only walls and roof, it was presence. And for the first time in years, he felt the faint, dangerous stir of hope. He did not know what storms might still come. He did not know what secrets she carried, or what wounds she hid behind steady eyes. But as the sun rose over the plains, spilling gold across the horizon, Caleb Rowan understood one thing with sudden clarity. The house was no longer empty. The days that followed Eleanor Whitmore's arrival unfolded like fragile pages in a book neither she nor Caleb Rowan had ever read before. The storm that had carried her to his doorstep had washed the plains clean, leaving the sky stretched wide and blue above the ranch. Yet beneath that calm sky, something restless stirred between them, unspoken, uncertain, alive. Eleanor learned the rhythm of the land quickly. She rose before dawn, often at the same time as Caleb. At first their mornings were quiet. He would nod in greeting, and she would return it with a soft smile. But silence no longer felt heavy. It felt shared. She mended shirts by the window while he worked the fields. She organized the kitchen shelves with careful hands. She scrubbed years of dust from corners that had long been forgotten. Slowly the house changed, not in grand ways, but in subtle ones. A jar of wildflowers on the table, curtains washed and tied back to let in light, the faint scent of lavender stitched into linens. Caleb noticed everything. He noticed how she hummed softly when kneading dough. He noticed how she paused at sunset, standing on the porch as if memorizing the colors of the sky. He noticed the sadness that sometimes flickered across her face when she thought no one was looking, but he did not ask. Not yet. One evening, nearly 2 weeks after her arrival, the cattle grew restless. The air felt strange, thick and electric. Caleb stood in the pasture, scanning the horizon. Dark clouds gathered in the distance. Another storm. He worked quickly, securing gates and guiding the herd toward safer ground. The wind rose faster than expected, sharp and cold. By the time he reached the barn, rain lashed against the roof like thrown gravel. He stepped inside and froze. Eleanor was there. Her dress was splattered with mud, her braid loosened by wind. She was struggling to secure a frightened mare, her small hands steady despite the chaos. "What are you doing out here?" he demanded over the roar of thunder. "Helping," she replied firmly. Lightning cracked overhead, illuminating her determined face. The mare reared slightly, but Eleanor spoke to it in a calm whisper, her palm pressed gently against its neck. Caleb moved beside her instinctively, Together, they fastened the stall door. The closeness stole his breath. Rain hammered the barn roof. The world outside blurred into grey fury. "You could have been hurt," he said, his voice low now. "So could you," she answered. For a long moment, neither moved. Water dripped from the brim of his hat. A strand of wet hair clung to her cheek. Without thinking, he reached out and brushed it away. The touch was brief, but it changed everything. Her breath caught. His hand lingered a heartbeat too long. Thunder rolled again, yet inside the barn there was a different kind of electricity. "Caleb," she began softly. A crash echoed outside, the sharp crack of wood splitting. His head snapped toward the sound. "The north fence." He ran into the storm without another word. The fence had collapsed under the force of wind. 2 calves had slipped through the broken section, frightened and scattered toward the open plains. Caleb's jaw tightened. Losing them would mean more than money. It would mean failure. He whistled sharply, searching through sheets of rain. Then he heard it, Eleanor's voice behind him. She had followed. "I'll head east," she shouted, already moving. He wanted to order her back, to keep her safe inside the house. But the desperation in the storm left no room for pride. They split into the darkness. The rain soaked through Eleanor's dress, weighing it down as she ran. Her boots sank into mud. Lightning flashed, revealing the small calf trembling near a shallow ditch. "Easy," she whispered, approaching slowly. The animal tried to bolt, but she moved carefully, blocking its path without force. She remembered her father teaching her patience in gentler times, long before debts and loss had stolen their home. "It's all right," she murmured again. Another flash of lightning, and she saw Caleb wrestling the second calf back toward the gate. Relief flooded her. Together they guided the animals back through the broken fence line. Caleb secured a temporary barrier, while rain streamed down his face. When at last they stood beneath the barn's partial shelter, soaked and breathless, the storm began to ease. Eleanor laughed softly. The sound startled him. "You're laughing?" he asked incredulously. Her eyes shone despite the rain. "We saved them." He stared at her, as if seeing her for the first time. Not fragile, not helpless, strong. The wind died gradually, leaving only steady rainfall. Without thinking, he stepped closer. "You shouldn't have come after me." She held his gaze. "You gave me shelter when I had nowhere to go. Did you think I would stand by while you fought alone?" The words struck deep. He had grown so used to solitude that he had forgotten what partnership felt like. His hand rose again, this time deliberately. He cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing rainwater from her skin. "You are not a burden here," he said roughly. "You are the best thing that has stepped onto this land in years." Her breath trembled. "And you," she whispered, "are kinder than you believe." The space between them disappeared. He kissed her, not fiercely, not recklessly, but with a tenderness born of loneliness and hope and fear all at once. She responded with equal softness, her fingers curling into his damp shirt, as if anchoring herself to something solid at last. When they finally parted, the storm had faded to a distant rumble. Caleb rested his forehead against hers. "If you wish to leave," he said quietly, "if this life proves too harsh." "I do not wish to leave," she interrupted gently. "I chose this. I choose it still." Emotion tightened his throat. For the first time since sending that desperate letter, he allowed himself to imagine more than survival. He imagined laughter filling the kitchen. He imagined shared burdens. He imagined a future. The following Sunday, they rode into town together. Whispers followed them as they stepped into the small church. Curious glances, raised brows, but Eleanor walked beside him without hesitation. During the service, Caleb reached for her hand. She did not pull away. Instead, her fingers intertwined with his, warm and certain. And when the preacher spoke of commitment, not merely of duty but of devotion, Caleb felt the truth settle firmly in his heart. Afterward, beneath the wide Montana sky, he turned to her. "Eleanor Whitmore," he said, voice steady despite the tremor in his chest, "I asked for a bride out of loneliness. But I have found something far greater than that." Her eyes shimmered. "I have found home," he finished. Tears slipped down her cheeks, not of sorrow, but of release. "And I," she replied, "have found a place where I am wanted." The plains stretched endlessly around them, no longer barren but full of promise. The ranch would still demand hard days. Storms would come again, but they would face them side by side. And as Caleb helped her into the wagon, his hand firm around hers, he understood a truth deeper than the land itself. Shelter was never just a roof over one's head. It was the courage to open a door. And love, once welcomed inside, could turn even the loneliest ranch into a home.